I was 63 years old when the letter arrived. A cream envelope, the kind that looks expensive just because of its weight, with my name written in a hand I didn't recognize. I almost tossed it into the pile of charity appeals and credit card offers, but something about the penmanship made me pause. Inside was a single page typed neatly on letterhead from the Harrington estate. My hands shook as I read. Mrs. Eleanor Brooks, after careful verification, we believe you may be connected to the Harrington family of Charleston. If you are willing, we invite you to visit the estate and meet Mr. and Mrs. Harrington. Please bring appropriate identification. Our attorneys will provide further context upon your arrival. The Harringtons. The name had been a whisper my entire life, something my adoptive parents never spoke of directly, but which had drifted into my ears anyway. When I was old enough to understand adoption, my mother, my real mother, the one who raised me, told me the official line, "Your birth parents were young and couldn't take care of you." That was it. No names, no explanations. Just a closed door. Now, at 63, the door had cracked open. I sat at my kitchen table, the linoleum peeling in the corners, the afternoon sun highlighting dust I hadn't gotten to. My whole life had been about working with what I had. Patching clothes, stretching paychecks, raising my son, David, after my husband walked out in 1982. I'd never had the luxury of marble foyers or estates with letterhead. And now, suddenly, the family I'd never met was reaching out. David came over that night with his wife and kids. I showed him the letter. He whistled low. "Mom, this is huge, the Harringtons. Aren't they like billionaires from shipping or something?" "I don't know what they are," I said, folding the paper like it might bite me. "I just know they're the ones who decided I wasn't worth keeping." David rested a hand on mine. "Then maybe now they finally have to face you." I wanted to believe that. The drive from Raleigh to Charleston took 6 hours, but it felt longer. I rehearsed possible scenarios in my head. Tears, apologies, polite explanations about the difficulties of youth. But when the iron gates of the Harrington estate loomed into view, with cameras tracking my beat-up sedan, all of those daydreams melted. The driveway curved through manicured gardens until the mansion appeared, 3 stories of white columns and black shutters, straight out of a history book that never mentioned who built it. A man in a dark suit met me at the steps. "Mrs. Brooks. This way, please." Inside, the air smelled faintly of lemon polish and something older, maybe secrets. He led me into a drawing room where 2 figures sat waiting. Margaret Harrington was 88 but carried herself like she still presided over charity luncheons. Her pearls gleamed, her posture was a blade. Beside her, William Harrington looked older, 90 maybe, his frame softened by years but his eyes still sharp. I had imagined warmth, some flicker of recognition. Instead, Margaret spoke first. "So, you are the child. Not daughter, not Eleanor, just the child." I sat down slowly. "Yes, I'm Eleanor Brooks, I suppose you knew that." "Names can be changed," Margaret said briskly. "DNA cannot." "Unfortunately." The way she said "unfortunately" made my stomach tighten. William said nothing, only studied me as though I were an exhibit at a museum he didn't quite approve of. "I don't want money," I said quickly, before they could accuse me. "I came for answers. I've lived my whole life not knowing who I was, why I was given away." Margaret's lips thinned. "You were given away because you were inconvenient. William and I were young, establishing ourselves, and a baby would have ruined everything." The words landed like stones. Inconvenient, ruined everything. 63 years of wondering, and this was the explanation. I drew in a slow breath. "I see, and now you're here," Margaret continued, "expecting compensation." I stared at her. "I don't expect anything, I wanted to understand." She waved a hand, dismissive. "Understanding won't change the past. We did what was necessary, and don't expect us to rewrite history now." For a moment, I thought I might collapse under the weight of her indifference, but then I remembered David's words. "Maybe now they finally have to face you." I stood slowly. "Thank you for your honesty," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "At least I won't waste any more years imagining you cared." I turned toward the door. "Where do you think you're going?" Margaret's voice was sharp, slicing through the room. I assumed we were finished. "William hasn't spoken yet," she said. "It would be rude to leave without hearing him." William finally cleared his throat. His voice was softer than hers, but no kinder. "You have the Harrington eyes," he said, "but that doesn't make you family." I almost laughed. Family. The word had been defined for me long ago by people with no money, no estate, no pearls. My adoptive parents had given me everything they could. My son had given me purpose. Family was never marble floors, it was showing up. "Then why invite me here?" I asked. Margaret leaned back, eyes narrowing. Because we prefer to handle potential problems directly. If you had gone to the press or tried to make claims, so that was it. They hadn't invited me for reunion. They had invited me for containment. My chest burned, but I forced myself to stay calm. You have nothing to fear. I'm not here to take anything. I just wanted the truth. Before they could answer, footsteps echoed down the hall. The butler appeared. Mrs. Harrington, Mr. Harrington, there is someone else here, a Miss Brooks. She says she is Alina's granddaughter. My heart lurched. David's daughter, Lily, 29, whip-smart, outspoken, a journalist in New York. She had insisted on coming with me, and I had told her no. She must have followed anyway. The door swung wider, and there she was. Tall, confident, her press badge still hanging from her bag strap. She strode into the room as if she owned it. "Sorry I'm late, Grandma," she said, kissing my cheek before turning to face Margaret and William. "Traffic from the airport was awful." Margaret blinked. For the first time since I'd walked in, she looked unsettled. "Who are you?" "I'm Lily Brooks," she said brightly. "Alina's granddaughter. Your granddaughter too, I suppose." William's eyes flickered, recognition dawning. He'd seen her face before, maybe in magazines, maybe online. Lily's bylines had been everywhere lately. "I wanted to meet you," Lily continued, "and I wanted to hear why you thought abandoning my grandmother was acceptable." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. That was how the battle lines were drawn, not between me and the Harringtons, but between them and the truth my granddaughter carried like a torch. For 63 years, I had been silent, but Lily had not been raised to swallow her words. She was the generation that asked questions out loud. And now, in the Harrington mansion, with portraits of ancestors glaring from the walls, she was about to demand answers that pearls and money couldn't deflect. And for the first time since I opened that letter, I felt something close to hope. Lily stood with her shoulders squared, a small notebook in one hand, her phone in the other. She looked every inch the journalist she was, except this wasn't an interview with a senator or a CEO, this was personal. Margaret tried to reclaim the room with a dismissive wave. "We weren't expecting you." "Well," Lily said evenly, "that seems to be a pattern in this family, doesn't it? Not expecting people." Her voice was calm, but it landed like a blow. William shifted in his chair. Margaret's knuckles whitened against the armrest. "I'll tell you what I do expect," Lily went on. "I expect answers, because my grandmother spent 63 years wondering who she was, and when she finally walked into this house, the first words you gave her were that she was inconvenient." Margaret inhaled sharply. "Young woman, you don't understand?" "No, you don't understand," Lily cut in. "I grew up watching my mother work double shifts to keep food on the table. I grew up watching my grandmother stretch every penny. And all that time, you were here in this palace pretending she didn't exist." Silence. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. I reached for Lily's hand, but she shook her head slightly, her eyes fixed on the Harringtons. "Here's the thing," Lily said, flipping her notebook open. "Public records are a beautiful thing, and so are archives. I looked into the Harrington Foundation's history on my flight down." Margaret stiffened. William's eyes flicked toward her, nervous. "In 1961, Lily read, 2 years after my grandmother was born, the Harringtons donated the equivalent of $10 million in today's money to the Charleston Orphan Society. With one condition, the funds had to be earmarked for children placed due to family circumstances." Sound familiar? My breath caught. The Charleston Orphan Society. That was where I had lived until adoption. The nuns with their strict voices, the walls painted pale blue, the smell of starch and soap. I had been one of those children. "You gave millions to help abandoned children," Lily continued, "while abandoning your own. Tell me, was that charity or was that guilt money?" William looked stricken. Margaret's lips pressed so thin they nearly disappeared. "That donation was for tax purposes," Margaret said at last, her voice brittle. "Sure," Lily replied. "And the later ones, 1975, $5 million to a children's hospital. 1989, $12 million to foster care programs. Year after year, you poured money into institutions that cared for children like the one you left behind, while never lifting a finger to acknowledge her existence." William finally spoke. His voice was rough. "We thought it was the best we could do. We couldn't raise her, but we could help others." Lily snapped her notebook shut. "You don't get points for trying to buy your way out of a mistake." I wanted to speak, to soften, to tell Lily that anger wasn't always the path. But I stayed quiet, because she was saying everything I had swallowed for decades. Then the door banged open. A man strode in, his face flushed, his tie loosened as if he had rushed from a meeting. "Mother, father, what the hell is going on?" Margaret straightened. "Charles, this is—" "I know who it is," he snapped, glaring at me then at Lily. You actually let them in? Do you have any idea what this could cost us? Charles Harrington. Their acknowledged son, my half-brother. He paced, sweat dampening his collar. I got a call from the board's legal counsel. Apparently someone has been digging into the family trust. His eyes locked on Lily. Was that you? Lily smiled, cool and sharp. My business manager did some research. She's very thorough. Charles paled. You have no right. She has every right, Lily shot back. Because my grandmother is your half-sister. DNA doesn't lie. And according to the original trust documents filed in 1954, any biological heir is entitled to a share. Margaret gasped. William closed his eyes. Charles froze. That clause was buried decades ago, Charles said hoarsely. Wrong, Lily replied, pulling a folder from her bag. It was never removed. It couldn't be, because it requires unanimous consent of all living heirs. And since a leaner was never acknowledged, she was never asked, which means the clause still stands. My head spun. Money had never crossed my mind, but now, here in this cavernous room, the weight of inheritance pressed down like a storm cloud. How much? I whispered. Lily glanced at her papers. The trust is worth about $1.4 billion. Charles gets half as the acknowledged heir. You're entitled to the other half, Grandma. The room erupted. Margaret made a strangled sound. William dropped his cane. Charles's face turned purple. You'll destroy us, he said, voice shaking. The board, the investors, if this comes out, everything we've built collapses. I stood slowly. My knees trembled, but my voice came out clear. Everything you built, or everything my grandfather built before you? Charles's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Lily's voice was steady. The truth won't destroy you. Hiding it will. Margaret finally rose to her feet, her pearls trembling against her chest. What do you want from us? For the first time, all eyes turned to me. My heart pounded. I thought of the years of working double shifts, of patching David's shoes, of telling myself the past didn't matter. And now here I was, standing in the house of people who had deemed me inconvenient. I met Margaret's gaze. I want acknowledgement. I want you to say out loud that I am your daughter. The silence stretched, brittle and sharp. Finally, Margaret's voice broke. You are my daughter. The words came out ragged, reluctant, but they existed. After 63 years, I had them. And I want one more thing, I said. My voice steadied. I want my share of this inheritance used to build something in honor of the parents who raised me. Frank and Lillian Brooks. A foundation, a school, something lasting, because they were the ones who taught me what family really means. Lily's hand slipped into mine. We'll make it happen, she whispered. Charles swore under his breath, pacing like a caged animal. This is insane. We can't just hand over. Be quiet, William said suddenly, his voice carrying a weight I hadn't heard before. Everyone turned. He looked at me, his eyes wet. She has every right, and we were wrong. I can't undo what we did, but I won't fight her now. Margaret's shoulders slumped, decades of armor cracking. If this becomes public, the family name, Lily cut in, will finally mean something. The confrontation stretched for hours. Lawyers were called. Documents spread across polished wood. At one point, Charles shouted so loudly a vase toppled from the mantel, but nothing could change the core fact. I was their daughter, proven by DNA and sealed by their reluctant acknowledgement. When Lily and I finally stepped back into the night air, the cicadas buzzing in the live oaks, I felt lighter. Exhausted, but lighter. You were incredible, I told her. She shook her head. No, Grandma, you were. You walked in there after 63 years and demanded to be seen. That's more than incredible, that's brave. For the first time since I opened that letter, I believed her. By the next morning, the Harrington estate was quiet in that uneasy way a house gets after voices have been used too hard. Lily and I returned, summoned by an email from their attorneys. We were led into a paneled room off the library, smaller, less intimidating than the conservatory. A long table waited, water glasses aligned with military precision. Margaret sat at the head, William beside her, cane hooked over his chair. Charles paced near the windows, phone clutched like a lifeline. Two lawyers flanked them, one gray and heavy, the other young and sharp-eyed. Mrs. Brooks, the elder lawyer began, our priority is to establish a framework that honors the trust instrument and avoids unnecessary damage. Harm to whom? Lily asked. Truth isn't vandalism. I almost smiled. My granddaughter knew how to set a room on edge. We got to the heart of it quickly. Acknowledgement, the public statement, and the fate of my share. The Frank and Lillian Fund, I said, named for my parents. Support for kids who age out of foster care. Housing stipends, counseling, scholarships, the things that slip through cracks. William nodded softly. Margaret's lips twitched, but she didn't object. The lawyers produced drafts. Documents transferring my share, Bylaws for the Foundation, a press statement. The draft statement read, "The Harrington family is pleased to announce that Margaret and William's daughter, Elinor Brooks, has been reunited with her parents after many years apart. Elinor was placed for adoption as an infant due to circumstances at the time. She has built a life of courage and service and is establishing a foundation in honor of her adoptive parents." I read it twice. Change, pleased, to nothing. And replace circumstances at the time with decisions we made and regret. The lawyers looked to Margaret. For a long moment she was stone. Then, to my surprise, she nodded. "Change it," she said. The room exhaled. We signed. Not dramatically, not like in movies. Just pen to paper, ink making something permanent. Afterward, Margaret asked me to stay for tea. I agreed. In the sunroom she poured with practiced hands, pearls trembling faintly against her blouse. For a long time we said nothing. Finally she whispered, "I was 19. My father told me if I kept the baby, he would erase me from the family. I thought I was saving something. I knew it was cowardice, but I did it anyway. You can't give me back the baby years," I said. "And I can't give you back the mother years, but maybe we can do something with what's left." She gave a brittle laugh. "I hate that you're kind." "I'm practical," I said. "Kindness travels with it." Lily returned then, all business. "One interview," she said. "Local paper first, then a national outlet that cares about policy, not gossip. You'll sit with us or the story will be that you hid." William surprised us both. "On camera," he said. "If we're going to be brave, let's be plainly brave." Margaret hesitated, then nodded. "The first interview took place not in their mansion but in my kitchen. The reporter asked if I hated the Harringtons. "I don't," I said. "I prefer to love the people who showed up." She asked Margaret what she regretted most. "Believing reputation was the same as character," she said, pearls suddenly heavier than diamonds. The story spread faster than I wanted. Some called me brave, some called me a fool for not pocketing the money. Lily made me stop reading comments after the third day. But amid the noise, something else happened. Letters arrived from strangers. Foster kids who'd aged out with nothing but a trash bag of clothes. Parents who'd adopted late in life. Teachers who kept granola bars in their desks for hungry students. They wrote to say the fund gave them hope. We launched it with a picnic behind the middle school where I'd worked. No stage, no velvet rope, just kids running under pecan trees, a local band missing every note by half a beat, potato salad sweating in the sun. William came in a wide brim hat. Margaret hovered at the edge, awkward but present. Charles stayed away. We announced the first grants: rent support for foster siblings placed apart, legal aid for guardians, scholarships for trade schools. A guidance counselor I once trained wept into her paper plate. That day a teenager approached me. "Miss Brooks, I'm Deshawn, your funds covering my security deposit. I start at Wake Tech next month." He grinned shyly. "Didn't think I'd ever make it." "Send me a picture when you get your keys," I told him. Weeks later, Charles appeared on my porch. He looked smaller without his boardroom armor. "I was cruel," he said, not meeting my eyes. "You were frightened," I replied. "Frightened people are cruel." He admitted he didn't know who he was without the trappings of money. Then he asked if he could help, not with dollars, but with time. "We need someone to drive a student from Smithfield to Durham twice a week," I said. "No cameras, just gas and patience." To my surprise, his face eased. "I can do that." He left with a paper schedule. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a beginning. Life settled into a rhythm of new names and old habits. William phoned weekly, sharing fragments of family history. Margaret texted photos of her garden, and once, a selfie with a child at the community center, her pearls traded for flats. Lily sent articles about policy and scolded me to drink water. We quarreled once when she made me sound saintly in a national magazine. "I'm no saint," I told her. "I'm a woman who makes lists." The public statement hung framed on my mantle. Not proof, but a reminder. Some nights I read the line we insisted on, decisions we made and regret, and felt something click into place. Not right, not healed, but true. On the first day of school, I went back to the middle school just to watch the rush. Backpacks too heavy, sneakers too clean. A new secretary waved me behind the counter. "You left big shoes," she whispered. A boy stood by the door, folder clutched like a shield. I crouched and said, "We've been expecting you." His shoulders dropped. Sometimes belonging is just someone saying you do. That evening, Lily and I ate watermelon on the steps, juice running down our arms. "Do you ever wish we'd taken the money?" she asked. "We did take it," I said. "We just spent it on other people's futures instead of our furniture." She laughed, then grew quiet. "Do you think you'll forgive them?" I thought of Margaret's trembling signature, William's hat at the picnic, Charles with a driving schedule on my fridge. Forgiveness is a room with the door open, I said. Some days I can step inside. Some days I can't, but I don't lock it. The mosquitoes grew bold. Before we went in, I touched the porch step that had cracked last winter and been patched in spring. The seam was still visible, but it held. One Saturday, an envelope arrived, Margaret's handwriting neat and deliberate. Inside, when you're ready, I'd like to learn to make coffee your way. Beneath it, a clipped recipe for sheet cake, her margin notes fussing about sugar. I laughed loud and startled. Not absolution, not erasure. An invitation to ordinary. I brewed 2 mugs, one for the life I'd had, one for the life opening like a window. Outside, the world carried on without fanfare. I set the envelope by the door, with fund flyers and a roll of tape, and a marker for writing names that deserved to be seen. When Saturday came, I'd walk her to the market. No cameras. Just flat shoes, coffee, and a boy named Deshaun needing help with a stubborn lock. Because some doors don't open unless someone stands beside you and turns the key.